The family reunion. My mill forced me to sleep in the cold basement. Servants belong downstairs, she laughed. Next morning the real estate agent arrived. Mrs. Miller, your $12 million mansion is ready for inspection. My mill's champagne glass shattered on the floor. I've always believed that true character reveals itself in how people treat those they think can't benefit them. My name is Emma Miller, and this is how I learned just how right that belief was. Growing up, my parents taught me the value of hard work and humility. My father was a janitor at a prestigious tech company, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They worked themselves to the bone to give me an education, often going without so I could have what I needed. Emma, sweetheart, my mother would say, her hands rough from years of scrubbing. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. Those words echoed in my mind as I worked my way through college, studying finance and computer science. By day, I attended classes. By night, I cleaned offices just like my father. But I had a secret that kept me going. I was developing a revolutionary financial algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. During my final year, while most students were partying, I was perfecting my program. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. My algorithm caught the attention of a major investment firm. They offered me $75 million for it, plus a position on their board. I accepted the deal but kept my wealth hidden. I continued living modestly, investing wisely, and growing my fortune quietly. That's when I met James. He literally ran into me at a small cafe where I was working on my laptop. Hot coffee splashed across the table, barely missing my computer. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, frantically grabbing napkins. His genuine distress made me laugh. "It's okay," I assured him, helping to clean up. "I'm Emma." "James, please let me buy you another coffee. It's the least I can do." One coffee led to dinner, and dinner led to more. James was kind, funny, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a high school teacher, passionate about making a difference in his students' lives. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Then I met his family. Patricia, my mother-in-law, lived in a sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood. Her husband Robert had passed away years ago, leaving her a comfortable inheritance from our first meeting. She made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her son. "A cleaner's daughter," she said, eyeing me over her wine glass. "How quaint." "James, darling, I thought you were dating that lovely doctor's daughter, Caroline." "Mom," James warned, but the tone was set. At every family gathering, Patricia found ways to remind me of my place. She'd ask me to help the catering staff, claiming I feel more comfortable in the kitchen. When James defended me, she'd laugh it off as just trying to make Emma feel at home. Her daughter, my sister-in-law, Amanda, was cut from the same cloth. A successful real estate agent, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her success or remind me of my humble beginnings. "And my dear," she'd say with false sweetness, "I have some clients looking for a cleaning service. Should I give them your mother's number?" I took it all in stride, partly because I knew the truth about my wealth, but mostly because I wanted to see people's true colors. James would squeeze my hand under the table, whispering apologies for his family's behavior, but never truly standing up to them. What they didn't know was that I have plans of my own. I've been quietly buying properties throughout the city, including several in Patricia's prestigious neighborhood. The mansion next door to hers had been on the market for months, and through a series of shell companies, I acquired it for $12 million. The annual family reunion was approaching, a 3-day affair where relatives from across the country gathered at Patricia's house. This year, however, would be different. "James, honey," Patricia announced at dinner a week before the reunion, "I've arranged the guest rooms. You'll stay in your old room, of course. Emma can use the basement. We need the good rooms for family who actually contribute to our gatherings." James shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, Emma's my wife, and as my daughter-in-law she should be grateful for whatever accommodation she receives." Patricia cut in smoothly. "Besides, with her background she's probably used to much worse." I simply smiled and said, "The basement will be fine, Patricia." If only she knew what was coming. The reunion began on a Friday. Cars filled Patricia's circular driveway as family members arrived. I helped carry luggage, serve drinks, and endure the usual snide comments about my background. That evening, as everyone settled into their luxurious guest rooms, I made my way to the basement with my small suitcase. The basement was cold and musty with a narrow cot set up in the corner. As I sat on the creaking bed, I heard laughter floating down from above. Patricia's voice carried clearly through the vents. "Can you believe she actually took the basement without complaint?" I told James he should have married Caroline. At least she knows how to carry herself in proper society. More laughter followed. I checked my phone. One new message from my property manager. "Everything is ready for tomorrow's inspection, Mrs. Miller. The mansion next door has been fully furnished according to your specifications." I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my back aching from the basement cot, and made my way upstairs. The kitchen was already bustling with activity as Patricia directed the catering staff for the day's brunch. "Oh, Emma, good. Since you're up, make yourself useful and help Maria with the dishes," Patricia commanded, not even looking in my direction. "And do try to stay out of sight when the guests arrive. We have some very important people coming today." I caught James's eye as he entered the kitchen. He looked pained but remained silent, reaching for his coffee. The familiar sting of his passive acceptance made me straighten my shoulders. Just a few more hours, actually, I said calmly, checking my watch. I have an appointment this morning. Patricia's head snapped up. An appointment? During our family reunion? How incredibly rude. Now, Mom, James began weakly, but Amanda cut him off as she swept into the kitchen. Mother, the Hendersons just pulled up. You know, the ones who bought that gorgeous mansion next door. She smirked at me. They're my biggest clients this year. The sale was worth $1 million in commission. Patricia preened. Wonderful. Emma, before you leave for whatever menial task you have planned, at least make yourself useful and help serve the Moses. I smiled. I really must go. My real estate agent is waiting. Real estate agent? Amanda scoffed. What are you looking at, studio apartments in the bad part of town? The doorbell rang, and Patricia hurried to answer it, shooting me a warning look. I followed the group into the grand foyer where a sophisticated woman in a sharp suit waited. Good morning, Mrs. Miller, she said, smiling directly at me. The mansion is ready for your final inspection. The room fell silent. Patricia's carefully crafted smile froze on her face. There must be some mistake, she said with a forced laugh. Emma isn't. Emma Miller, I confirmed, stepping forward, owner of the mansion next door. Amanda's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. That's impossible. I handled that sale. Through my shell corporation, yes, I said pleasantly. I believe your commission check was quite substantial. James stared at me, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. Emma, what's going on? Perhaps we should all sit down, I suggested, gesturing to the living room. I have quite a story to tell. Once everyone was seated, Patricia and Amanda perched on the edge of their seats like birds ready to take flight. I began. 7 years ago, I developed a financial algorithm that sold for $75 million, I said calmly. Since then, my investments have multiplied that many times over. The mansion next door is just one of many properties I own. But you let us think, Patricia sputtered, that I was a cleaning lady's daughter who married above her station. I finished. Yes, I did. And you all showed me exactly who you are through how you treated someone you thought was beneath you. This is absurd. Amanda stood up, her face flushed. Mother, she's clearly lying. My real estate agent cleared her throat. I can assure you, Mrs. Henderson, that Mrs. Miller's credentials are impeccable. In fact, she owns controlling interest in the development company that built this entire neighborhood. Patricia's face had gone from red to white. The entire neighborhood, including this house, I confirmed quietly. I bought it last month when it was technically still under your late husband's estate. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. James had sunk into his chair, his face a mask of shock and dawning realization. You mean? Patricia's voice trembled. This isn't my house anymore. It's mine, I said simply. Just like the basement where you made me sleep last night. Amanda jumped up. Mother, she can't do this. We'll fight it in court. You're welcome to try, I replied. My lawyers have ensured everything is perfectly legal, but right now I'd like you both to leave my house. Leave? Patricia gasped. But where will I go? This is my home. Was your home? I corrected. Don't worry. I've arranged for temporary accommodations for you. There's a modest apartment available in the building where my parents used to work as janitors. I hear the basement unit is particularly cozy. The family gathering had devolved into chaos. Relatives whispered among themselves, some looking shocked, others secretly pleased to see Patricia's pride take such a fall. James finally found his voice. Emma, why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. I turned to face my husband. Would it have made a difference? Would you have stood up to your mother's treatment of me if you'd known I was wealthy? Because if money is what it takes to earn basic respect in this family, then we have bigger problems than where I sleep. The real estate agent cleared her throat. Mrs. Miller, shall we proceed with the inspection of your new property? Yes, I said, standing. Patricia, I'll have my staff help you pack. You have until tomorrow evening to vacate the premises. As I walked toward the door, Patricia's voice rang out, suddenly honey and pleading. Emma, dear, surely we can discuss this. We're family after all. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. Family? Let's talk about family, Patricia. Last Christmas you seated me at the children's table and told everyone it was because I wouldn't know how to behave at the adults' dinner. Last month you accidentally excluded me from James's birthday celebration. And just yesterday, you made me sleep in a basement because you said I wasn't good enough for a real room. I didn't mean, she scammer. Yes, you did, I said firmly. You meant every slight, every insult, every attempt to humiliate me. You showed me exactly who you are, Patricia. Now I'm showing you exactly who I am. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the silent house as I walked out, head held high. Behind me I could hear Patricia's sobs and Amanda's angry protests, but I didn't look back. The following weeks were a storm of activity and emotions. Patricia and Amanda moved out as required, though not without drama. They hired lawyers, of course, but as my legal team had predicted, every transaction was ironclad. I moved into the mansion next door, leaving James to decide his own path. The distance gave me time to think about our marriage and what it meant to build a life with someone who couldn't stand up for you. One evening, about a month after the revelation, my security team alerted me to a visitor. James stood at my front door looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I led him to my home office, a warm room filled with family photos, including one of my parents on their 30th anniversary. James's eyes fixed on it as he sat down. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, about everything. About us. I've also been seeing a therapist. I waited, letting him find his words. I failed you, Emma. Not just at the reunion, but every time I let my mother treat you like you are beneath us. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just being a coward. Yes, you were, I agreed softly. He winced but continued. The thing is, I kept wondering why you didn't tell me about your success. Then I remembered last Thanksgiving when Mom made that comment about your father being just a janitor, and I laughed. I actually laughed. Tears formed in his eyes. That's when you were going to tell me, wasn't it? I nodded. I had the papers in my bag. But watching you laugh at your own father-in-law, I realized that you were just like them. I was, he admitted, and that shame is mine to carry. But Emma, I want you to know what's happened since you left. He straightened in his chair. I resigned from my teaching position at Brighton Prep. This surprised me. James had taught at the prestigious private school for years. I took a job at Riverside High School instead, he continued. It's in the neighborhood where you grew up. The kids there, they remind me of you. Brilliant, determined, just needing someone to believe in them. And your mother, I haven't spoken to her since she moved out. She and Amanda have been trying to rally the family against you, but it backfired. Cousin Sarah came forward about how Mom had treated her when she married beneath her station. Then Uncle Robert shared stories about her behavior toward his second wife. It's like your courage in standing up to her gave others permission to speak their truth. I absorbed this information, noting the changes in James. He seemed more grounded, more present. There's more, he said. I've been volunteering at the community center where your mom used to work. Did you know they have a program teaching financial literacy to cleaning staff and janitors? I'm helping them expand it. Why are you telling me all this, James? Because I want to earn back your respect, he said simply. Not because you're wealthy, but because you're the same amazing woman who helped me grade papers until midnight and made soup when I was sick. I was too weak to deserve you before. I want to become someone who does. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Patricia. Your mother's at the apartment building. I told James. She's demanding to speak with me. You don't have to go, he said quickly. Actually, I think I do. I found Patricia in the basement apartment where she now lived. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Her designer clothes looked out of place against the concrete walls. Hello, Patricia. She turned, and I was struck by how different she looked. The carefully maintained facade had cracked, showing the insecure woman beneath. Emma, she said, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Finally, she whispered, I understand now. Understand what? What it feels like to be judged by where you live? To have people look down on you? Her hands trembled. Yesterday I couldn't get a restaurant reservation because of my new address. Me, I've been going there for 20 years. Feels awful, doesn't it? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've been horrible, not just to you but to so many people. Living here, being treated the way I treated others, it's opened my eyes. That was the point, I said quietly. She looked up sharply. You mean, this wasn't just revenge? Revenge would have been making you homeless. This was about education. Patricia sank onto the small sofa. I've lost everything. My home, my social standing, my son. You haven't lost James, I corrected. He's choosing to be his own man for the first time. Whether you lose him permanently depends on whether you can accept that change. And you? She asked hesitantly. Have I lost you as a daughter-in-law? I studied her carefully. That depends on you too, Patricia. Real change takes more than a few weeks of humility. Will you help me? She asked softly. I don't mean financially. I mean help me learn to be better. It was the first time I'd ever heard genuine vulnerability in her voice. 6 months later I hosted a dinner party. Patricia was there, wearing a simple dress rather than her usual designer labels. She helped in the kitchen not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. Amanda came too, having recently started volunteering at a women's shelter, a requirement I'd added to release when she asked to rent one of my properties. James and I were still working on our marriage, picking things day by day. He'd proven his commitment to change, not through grand gestures but through consistent actions and unwavering support. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around the table. My parents were there, my father deep in conversation with James about the financial literacy program, which had expanded to 3 more community centers. My mother and Patricia were exchanging recipes, their previous class barriers dissolved. Emma, Patricia said during dessert, I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching me that true worth isn't about where you live or what you own. It's about how you treat people. She smiled salely. I just wish I'd learned that lesson sooner. Later that night, as James and I stood on our balcony overlooking the neighborhood, he asked, do you regret any of it? I thought about the past year, the pain, the growth, the transformations. No, I said finally. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. He took my hand, and we stood in comfortable silence watching the stars. The basement apartment where Patricia lived was visible from our vantage point, its lights glowing warmly in the darkness. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to become better than they were. My phone buzzed a message from my investment team about another successful algorithm deployment, but for once, I didn't check it immediately. Some things were more valuable than money, and I was finally surrounded by people who understood that truth.